Hello and welcome to Fall Damage, a channel where we will be discussing things mostly related to Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. My name is Jeremy, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about some advice and some insight for running your first ever Dungeons & Dragons game. Maybe this is your first time ever playing D&D, or maybe you've been a player in a couple of other campaigns, or maybe you've actually run a couple of sessions before and you're just looking for a little bit of advice and some more insight into the game itself. Then this just might be the right video for you. I've broken down my top 5 favorite tips for running your first, and honestly any game really, of D&D. So, without any further ado, let's just jump straight into it. Starting at number 1, don't stress over the rules. So you've probably heard this one before, and honestly for really good reason. This is probably one of the single most valuable pieces of advice that you can give to any dungeon master, whether they're seasoned or just starting out for the first time. The rules are a wonderful tool that have been created and are set in place to provide both context and consistency to your games. Without any established rule system in place, the game would almost certainly devolve into a whole lot of chaos pretty quickly. So the rules are important. They're just not that important. At the time of this video, Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition has 28 books in publication. These range and comprise of things from the actual core rulebooks themselves to adventures, as well as campaign guides. That's a lot. That's thousands of pages of information. Things from rules and guides and lore and background information. You have literally no way of ever memorizing all of that. So don't bother. Focus on the basics. Wizards of the Coast has actually provided a PDF on their website of the basic rules. And these really focus on a lot of the foundational and fundamental rules to the game. Take a look, read it over. Honestly, maybe even read it over a few times. Whatever you need to do to help you feel the most comfortable and the most prepared for your game. But do not stress over it. Do your best to get a good feel and understanding of how the rules actually work, especially the fundamentals of combat. That can be really important, but memorizing every single page, it's not helping anyone. Your role as a dungeon master is to help facilitate and to guide your players, but you matter too. Don't forget that you are also playing the game along with them. So you shouldn't really be worried and freaking out about the fact that you haven't memorized every single page of the player's handbook. That's not fun. The reason you are playing this game with your group and with your friends is ultimately to have fun. I would recommend keeping a copy of the basic rules or the player's handbook handy and nearby during any game session, just in case a rules question comes up. And if one does, then you actually have a couple of options, If it's something simple and probably not all that consequential, like how long does light armor take to equip? You could quickly reference the book and the rules if you really wanted to, but honestly, you don't even have to do that. It probably makes more sense just to make a quick judgment call in the moment and just kind of roll with that. And if it matters to you, take a look at it later, reference the rules and actually find out what the answer is. But once you do, it is important that you get back to your players so they have a little bit more insight and context going forward as well. The consistency does truly matter. But maybe the rule is a little bit more important, a little bit more consequential. What if one of your players takes damage when they're unconscious? What happens? If you don't know the rules to that, that might be one of the situations where it's a little bit more important to actually take a couple of minutes and look through the book. Make sure that you understand the rules there. You don't want one of your players to die by accident just because you didn't know something. Ultimately, you really don't want to be cross-referencing the rule books throughout the session and all that often. It will bog down play dramatically and kind of make the game feel a little bit like homework, and that's not really fun for anyone. I will be doing another video at some point in the future about my view of the role of rules in the game. So for now, I think this pretty much sums it up. Number 2, I absolutely cannot stress this enough, setting expectations. Before running your first game, talk to your players and discuss with them the type of game that this is going to be. Is this going to be some hardcore gothic horror style vibe with strict 100% adherence to the rules at all times, at every aspect, no matter what? Or is it going to be much more of a silly, lighthearted game where a group of gnomes is running a brothel in some faraway town somewhere else? Maybe it falls somewhere in the middle. It'll probably fall somewhere in the middle. Is this going to be an adventure that takes years of real life time to play through, or is this going to be a one-shot? Your players need to know what they're signing up for, need to know what they're getting into, so be clear about that with them. It's really important that you just talk to your players. Let them know what you have in mind and hear from them what they want to have out of the game as well. Ultimately, when everyone sits down at the table to play, they're here to have fun. If someone is dreading each week because this game is a little bit more than they bargained for, then that's a problem. So do your best to communicate clearly and effectively what your ideas and your expectations are, and make sure you hear them back from your players as well. Maybe one of your players has got really busy with life, but they really want to make that commitment to play, but they just don't have time to do a whole lot of background research and information. Maybe let that character take a little small backseat for a little bit of time until that player is ready. Tailor your game to the needs and the expectations of your players as they see fit. And this ties in really well with number 3, which is setting a schedule. Look, you get it, I get it. We're all busy. So setting aside a few hours to find the time to play a game might seem like a little bit of a waste of time, or something that's a little bit difficult to schedule, but I can promise you that it is crucial to the long-term success of your game. One of the most frustrating and difficult things to happen in any game of D&D doesn't even happen in the game itself. It's dealing with those constant group chat messages of, hey, I can do Wednesday or Thursday, and oh, that doesn't work for me, but I can do Friday. Having to navigate and manage these conversations every single week is an absolute one-way ticket straight to a dumpster fire of continuity for your game. Discuss the cadence of your game and make sure that everyone is comfortable with it. When are you playing? Every Tuesday? Every second Wednesday? The 1st or the 15th of each month? It doesn't really matter what it is. Cody from Taking 20 mentioned in one of his videos that he's a huge fan of the 3 weeks on, 1 week off cadence. This is the great benefit of consistency, so everyone knows exactly what night that they need to be prepared and they need to set aside for your game. But it also provides some really amazing level of flexibility, because now everyone knows that not every Thursday for the next forever is permanently blocked off. Whatever you decide on, make sure everyone is good with it. And if someone's circumstances change, bring it up and discuss it again. Just because you're setting a schedule doesn't mean that that schedule cannot change along with it. Number 4 is do not feel pressured. So this one might sound a little bit ambiguous and maybe a little bit strange at first, but I promise, hear me out. Maybe you or some of your players have seen some Critical Role or High Rollers, and maybe there's some expectation set that you're going to be just like Matt Mercer or Mark Humes. I can absolutely promise you that that is not going to happen. These guys are professionals. They are extremely talented, and they have dedicated thousands and thousands of hours to their craft. Your first game is going to look and sound absolutely nothing like Critical Role, and that's okay. Don't feel pressure to make your game just like one of theirs, because it isn't. Don't feel pressured to make up new voices for every NPC. Don't feel pressured to vividly describe and narrate every single sword swing and spell cast. You really don't have to. D&D is about having fun and making some amazing moments and experiences with your group. So you should only do what you feel comfortable with. Maybe you do get to a point where you want to try throwing in some new voices or accents or getting a little bit more descriptive with your gameplay. That's awesome, but make sure just make it your own and do what you feel comfortable with. Even though it might feel like you're on stage because you're the DM and all of your players are looking up and waiting on your every single word, you're not on stage. You're there to laugh and have fun and make some great memories with some friends. You don't have to treat every session like a performance if that's not who you are. Number 5 is starting with a pre-written module. Trust me. Doing everything else I've already talked about in this video is plenty hard enough. The last thing that you really want to add into the mix is creating and maintaining and describing your own homebrew world to your players. Focus on the things that really matter first. Learning some of the basics of the rules, getting to know your players and the way that they actually play the game, getting a better understanding of your own style and flow as a dungeon master, and using a pre-written module lets you really do all of those things. They really let you focus on improving your own skills and your own self as a dungeon master, which will ultimately make your game a lot better and a lot more fun. I'm not saying that you should never homebrew. Aspects of homebrew are going to find their way into the game, no matter what, whether you want them to or not. Whether it's small tweaks to rules or the addition of short little side quests, it's going to happen at one point or another. But I can promise you that using a pre-written module as your jumping off point for getting into D&D will go a long way to helping you learn and love the game. Wizards of the Coast has printed tons of adventures for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, but if you're just starting out, there are 2 that I would certainly highlight. Dragon of Icespire Peak, from the D&D Essentials kit and the Lost Mine of Phandelver from the D&D starter set. These adventures are written with new players and dungeon masters in mind. They are relatively straightforward, but also complex and compelling enough to really have a lot of broad appeal to them. They both serve as excellent jumping off points for getting into a D&D campaign if your players want to continue with the same characters, or even if they want to roll new ones after it's done. Personally, I am partial to Dragon of Icespire Peak. I find the quest board structure really appealing to new dungeon masters and players alike. And I just think the story itself is really fun and intriguing and also pretty exciting. Because who doesn't love slaying a dragon? So that's it. Those are my top 5 tips for running your first ever game of Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. I do sincerely hope that you got something of value out of this video. Whether you did or didn't, please leave me a comment below. I'm still very new to YouTube and I'm trying to learn and do my absolute best to create the kind of content that people want to see. So with that in mind, take care.